Welcome back, nerds. Fino here with a guide for Locusta. She's a 4-star limited assassin introduced in Lilim Harlot, the FGO arcade crossover. But you know what's funny? She's apparently not an FGO arcade. Mobile original. Very strange stuff. But regardless, she's got quite a challenging task, having to compete with a handy welfare servant, Chiki Ryogi. Does the Mushroom Menace have enough power to make a name for herself? Let's find out. First up in Locusta's cookpot is Poison Mixing. It's an AoE 5-turn poison debuff that comes with 3 turns of arts and NP gain for herself. Now she can take advantage of enemy poison stacks, but what if she gets a taste of her own medicine? That's where Toughness Poison comes in. This grants her guts and damage reduction, but for 5 turns. It also converts any poison damage she takes into healing. In fights where enemies either spray out poison on death or the boss spams it as a matter of course, Locusta can turn this otherwise debilitating mechanic into a source of healing. She even has a tool to get started on that front. Cooking Mushroom is a 20% party battery that also lets her apply poison to enemies on hit for 3 attacks. It then poisons Locusta for 5 turns with a 1k damage tick. Or should I say a 1k healing tick. At minimum, this will counterbalance the self-damage from Black Grail. Pretty handy, though you'll want to use those 2 skills in tandem so your coverage doesn't slip. Otherwise it really will do damage. To make the most of these resources, I'd recommend getting Locusta's starting charge and eventually cooldown reduction of pen skills. That on-hit poison is for more than just flavor. It plays into her noble phantasm, Finis Fungus. This is a single target arts attack that applies a preemptive 5-turn poison and deals 15% more damage for each poison stack on your target, accounting for a maximum of 10 stacks. It then follows up with a 5-turn poison amp. It overcharges a preemptive arts buff for a single turn. This special damage is like a near universal anti-buff that Locusta can set up at least in part by herself, which is very cool in concept. But that starting magnitude is nothing special. There's also the usual nuisance where debuffs only stay on the enemy you put them on. You can't carry them around like buffs, so this inherently puts Locusta at a disadvantage when she needs to handle enemies in separate waves. If your goal is to push Locusta's damage, then there's some tricks you should take advantage of. Firstly, and this step is the most important, you'll want to get Locusta to level 59 as quickly as possible. Seems like an oddly specific number, right? Well, that's because it's the level at which Locusta evolves into Volcarona, giving you access to Quiver Dance. But if you're unable to transfer Locusta into Pokemon Bank, then you'll have to stick with methods that exist within Fate Grand Order. To start, you'll want to cheat your poison stacks up. The lowest commitment way of doing this is to equip her with poison command codes like Great Witch's Barley Drink, Tarask Tragic Dragonkin Who Knew Not of Love, and Faint Black Delusion's Command Seal. Unfortunately, poison codes aren't nearly as common as curse or burn options, so running a full selection is off the table. But if you have devoted friends, you can ask them to put those codes on their Castorias, giving you access to double the number of live command cards. For your missing slots on Locusta, try Mage of Flowers to smooth out your refund a little, and Da Vinci for extra NP damage. The next potential step is a bit more onerous. That is to increase the total number of poison stacks with a second attacker. After a second upgrade, Semiramis applies poison on hit, but the two have very little in common aside from their class, and will probably get in each other's way. Hasana the Serenity is the most accessible option, and if your sole goal is to max out poison stacks, she's probably the best at it. She's got poison coming out of every orifice, her NP, one of her skills, and she also applies a stack on each arts attack. Of course, both Serenity and Locusta are resource-intensive attackers, so you'll probably want to swap one of them out in favor of a second charger once you've gotten a satisfactory number of stacks. Bishone is another consideration. She's a Lancer and a relatively recent addition on JP, but she can both apply poison stacks on her quick cards and cash them in with her NP, which scales with stacks, much like Locusta's. I have a team in mind where you run either the Locusta Arts package or the Bishone Quick package first, and have the weaker team suicide into whatever boss you're fighting, doing damage and getting as many stacks as possible. Then your reserve roster comes in and rides off those stacks for an immediate damage boost. One final option of note is Kate Kuker Priestess, aka Summer Balban. While her method of applying poison is quite slow and cumbersome, she does possess a skill that can extend the duration of such debuffs. So you get fewer poison stacks, but they last much longer, especially if you're running 2 copies of Summer Balban. Locusta does have a poison amplifier, and if you are so inclined, you could run her with other amplifiers like Koyanskaya of Darkness, but I would advise against this. You're working harder for less effective results, and you'd get more done by either going the stack route or having Locusta just spam her Noble Phantasm to the exclusion of everything else. To that end, you're working with the usual suspects. 2 Castorias if you have one of your own, and Castoria Juvu if you don't. But even with these no-brainer picks, there is something to be wary of. You see, being poisoned is a debuff. And while watching Locusta slurp down toxic waste might convince you otherwise, Castoria and Jufu don't make that distinction. With Jufu at least, you can just sequence her skills first. But things get quite a bit more complicated with Castoria. If you're fighting a punching bag, then you don't need Castoria's Noble Phantasm and you're good to go. But if you need to guard yourself against a major counterattack, then you have to worry about cleansing off Locusta's free healing. The timing on Round of Avalon tends to be pretty inflexible. You either use it during your enemy's NP turn, or try to do an overcharge chain earlier and hope your stacks last long enough. For this reason, you should prepare to hold back Locusta's second round of skills until after your defensive needs are met. If health becomes a serious issue, consider running Tamamo no Mae or Lady Avalon in place of a second charger. Their healing will give you more longevity in long, grinding fights. Or maybe I should say they'll give Castoria more longevity. She'll probably need it more. So how does Locusta measure up against Shiki? Pretty well, believe it or not. She does slightly more damage with just a baseline number of stacks, and this is while Shiki's got her 1-turn buff and NP upgrade. And if you manage to get a bunch of poison on your target, you're looking at a blowout. Obviously, she can't insta-kill like Shiki, which I'm sure saved a number of you during Chaldea Heavy Industries. That's a mark against Locusta. Shiki also has the convenience of being a welfare servant, and while she hasn't been available for several years on the NA server, she'll be added to the evocation system in its 5th wave, along with Grey and the Mecha Ellies. So availability is a point in Shiki's favor. Locusta, by comparison, is a limited servant. She's not exclusively stuck to Draco. The Lilim Harlot rerun puts her on Tiamat's banner too, but you can't exactly count on her presence long term. But Locusta's biggest weakness is that debuff-reliant servants have to deal with a lot of bullshit that buff-based attackers don't. She's obviously hard-walled by debuff-immune bosses, and she struggles against ones with skill-based cleanses, since enemies don't necessarily have cooldowns. But even beyond that, it means you lose a fair bit of damage in moving fights, ones where you can't keep hitting the same target. Even though she has a party battery, which would otherwise give her 90++ potential, her need to set up shop every single wave is a pretty serious impediment on that front. Unless she's only responsible for a single wave, in which case you can still leverage her baseline damage. Another weakness is that a refund isn't particularly impressive. But then again, single-target arts assassins are historically quite bad at that. Shiki only has her arts buff for 1 turn, Li Xuan has a single hit on his Noble Phantasm, and Kiritsugu has gimped NP gain. Did they ever fix that? I don't think they did. It's kind of a miserable state of affairs, so I won't hold it against Locusta. The good news is that she completely dumpsters poison spammers. I guess she's less like Larvesta and more like Gliscor on that front. And unless I'm mistaken, Locusta is the only servant in the game with this particular effect. Now you could replace her with a poison immune servant instead, for situations where you're contending with a lot of it, but turning those debuffs into a resource is a power with quite a bit of potential. Admittedly, I haven't run into any situations where I jumped up and went, "Oh shit, Locusta would be perfect for this. She's the only way." But if such a scenario ever appears, Locusta has the market cornered. Overall, I wouldn't go out of my way to get her, just because Quartz is going to be extremely tight this year. But if you ended up with a bunch from chasing Draco, she's actually quite useful, and you can probably treat her as an upgrade over your existing single-target arts assassin. Good? Yes. Interesting? Definitely. Worth dropping everything to get? No, but not for lack of trying. Thanks for watching, lads. Like if you found this video helpful, subscribe for more, and come watch my twitch.tv/Finotaisen where I stream every week, 3 p.m. Pacific time. On Friday, I'll be doing a Master Duel draft. Saturday's going to have my first foray into Fate Extra CCC, aka the game BB comes from, and Sunday's going to have Draco rolls on my main account. You won't want to miss it. See you there.